welcome to Two Guys on Politics Season 2, Episode 6, Bill. This is our 6th episode. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And we got a couple topics this morning. One of them is the continuing saga of Hunter Biden. I don't know if this is a story about a drug-addled, waif, is lost on the streets, or a powerful business guy whose father happens to be the former vice president, very influential former senator, and now the president of the United States, Hunter Biden. It just seems like this controversy on him has been extended, it's been dragged out, and it's going nowhere fast because the father has an election coming up. Unlike the lightning speed at which they were able to throw 4 indictments at a former president who is the most hated person in the world of the fourth estate, the news media. What do you think of this Hunter Biden issue? Am I just wasting our time with it, or do you think it's a serious topic?
Well, I had lunch today with a gentleman who is a Republican, but he is definitely not a Trumper. His theory on this is that they are going to retry Hunter Biden on the gun charge. That's really all they're going to recharge him on, because the statute of limitations on anything else that they could charge him with has run out. And they want to charge him with the gun deal, and they want to do it as quickly as possible, so that if he is found guilty and his father is still in the White House, which he should be, what his father can do for his wayward son, can pardon him.
Absolutely.
So that's the theory I got today from this friend of mine. As I say, he's a Republican, but he's not a Trumper. On the other hand, he believes that these 4 indictments against former President Trump is to get him on something before he is running for re-election to President of the United States. Of course, this individual also believes that the upper echelon of the federal government is corrupt, particularly the Justice Department and the FBI.
You can use my name, Bill. You can say it's from me.
No. So believe it or not, there's someone else thinks the same way.
Oh my gosh, there's someone else?
I was shocked.
Well,
I couldn't believe it.
This Hunter Biden issue for me is just the ultimate example of media hypocrisy. It's something we're going to talk about in a few minutes about the political divide. I think it's part of the cause, the fuel that is keeping this polarization alive in America. I think that what happened was the media dragged its feet to hit that that 7 years, so they get, I don't know if it's 5 years or 7 years in this case.
I think it's 5, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, 5 years, I think. So they can get it to the point where it was no longer prosecutable. But at the same time, they wanted to have something that they could charge him with that would be a meaningless charge, where he would get no punishment, and it would include a provision that says, which these agreements do include, that he can't be prosecuted for any of this other stuff after this. To me, it was all orchestrated by recently by the Justice Department. The media dragged its feet. They buried it so that it would get past the statute of limitations, where it would be impossible to prosecute him. And it almost worked, except for a federal judge said that the two sides were not interpreting this agreement that they came to, in which Hunter Biden would plead guilty, and instead of getting prison time, he'd get a slap on the wrist. His attorney says the government also agreed never to prosecute him for anything else, anything that's already out there. Wow. Do you think Trump would have turned down an offer like that? He probably would have pled guilty to a minor charge too if he were going to get slapped on the wrist. But there are a lot of people out there that see this as the ultimate hypocrisy that is fueling the divide that we're going to talk about. And honestly, everything I've read about Hunter Biden, we've never properly investigated it. He used his father's clout to get his contracts. When his father was vice president, they lie about that it was only the period between when he was vice president and when he ran for president. That's the only time his father helped him. I don't believe that. I'm
Well,
a father. I
let me
would help
interrupt
my
you for a
kid
minute.
anytime.
I heard on TV that was exactly what the situation was. That the only time he talked to his father about his business dealings was between the time his father was vice president and president. Right. And I told that to a couple of other people, and they disagreed with me. So I did an exhaustive research trying to find exactly what was the truth. And it turns out that while Joe Biden was vice president, he did talk to his son about some of these political deals that he was involved in. Now, there's still no link to Joe, but it was a lie that it was between the vice presidency and the presidency. It lapped over into the vice presidency.
Right. And this part where it says there's no link. Let me tell you that they discovered 50,000 emails that Vice President Joe Biden used under anonymous names. I don't have them in front of me, but it was JR lying or some weird emails in which he talked about his son as the vice president, but not using his official email. He used an anonymous email, where you make up an email name and you send, and that's what they used. And they got that wrapped up in a federal law that says, what is that museum where they hold the archives of presidents?
Yeah, I know what
there's like a national archives, and it could take 2 years before they'll ever release those so that they could be investigated. Now, it seems like the media is willing to just roll over and say, yeah, he's the vice president. He didn't do anything. These emails, they can't be anything. We'll wait until 2 years from now when we could look at them. If this were Donald Trump and he were communicating with, I'm the best president in the world at Comcast.net or Hotmail.com, the media would be all over it. And they'd be demanding an immediate investigation. But we're not hearing that. The fact that he used these 4 different anonymous emails that were him to talk about his son's business is absolute proof in my mind that something wrong happened, and they're dragging it out for as long as possible.
Well, Ray, I've heard of these emails, and I've heard of the assumed names. And I don't mean to put you on the spot in any way, but where do you have any proof that these emails were from Joe Biden?
Well, see, that's the thing. The government admits that he used pseudonyms. This James Comer asked the National Archives for the unredacted records so they could determine whether it was true, but they're not going to release them. They said it's going to take several years before we can actually look at it. And I'm trying to find some of the names. J.R.B. Ware, Robert L. Peters, Robin Ware. These were names that Vice President Biden used to, whatever his purpose is, whatever his excuse, and they were all on Gmail, he's never explained. And I think that's the big question. Why not just get the explanation? Why don't we have an explanation? Why don't we know whether it's true or not? Because they don't want us to know. Maybe 2 years from now, when the statute of limitations runs out
Well,
and we
or
can't prosecute.
maybe it's just very personal about him trying to get his son, off of these drugs and into a rehab program.
Well, maybe they are very personal, but when you're the president of the United States and you're the vice president of the United States, should we just take your word on it? Oh, well, Richard Nixon really didn't tell anybody to cover up that crime. Let's take his word for it. Why should we investigate? Shouldn't somebody investigate it? Somebody who is independent and objective and tell us, we've looked at these emails. All they have to do with is a father express. He just was embarrassed to put his name on it, to ask his son to get off drugs because he was a crack addict and a drug, in drug-induced comas for how many years? And he had a problem with drugs, which is part of the reason, that he's being investigated today, that they're treating as if it's nothing. That's the thing that bothers me. This is the son of a former vice president, someone with a lot of clout, and they're going out of their way to protect him the same way I felt that they went out of their way to protect George W. Bush from allegations that his father helped him avoid service during the Vietnam War. And it always bothered me that we could never get a proper answer for that. So to me, this isn't a Republican or Democratic issue. This is something that the media should be jumping on. And if I were a reporter, this would be the biggest story of my life, and I'd be reporting those facts. But we're not getting any facts. We're left with what ifs that I don't think are good enough.
Well, I happen to agree with you. I don't think it's good enough either. But I don't know what can be done about it. The fellow that is prosecuting Hunter Biden is a Republican. He's a lifelong Republican. What would be his motivation in trying to cover up for
Listen,
Hunter?
And listen, Bill, you know as well as I do that in today's world, despite this image of the Republican Democrats killing each other and they're polarized and everything, there are people that are willing to work with the other side for whatever benefit, maybe some personal benefit, maybe for some appointment. That the problem with all this is the public is being asked, let's just trust the system. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. I don't think that's the right answer. The worst part of it is that the news media has just laid down on these issues. They refuse to investigate it. They refuse to hold it up to the same kind of scrutiny that they apply to Donald Trump. And I'm certainly not saying that Donald Trump doesn't deserve the scrutiny, that he shouldn't have to defend himself in court. I'm saying that the enthusiasm and energy that they're putting in to get Trump, they're using that same energy in reverse to protect President Joe Biden.
Okay. We'll find out someday if we live long enough.
Yeah, but isn't that this is the thing that bothers me? It's like and I'm not saying you don't care. I'm saying that the media is hoping that, well, we boxed them in, they can't go anyplace with it. Let's just move on and talk about something else. I don't think we should do that. I think we should be screaming about it. We should demand answers, and we should know whether our president used his office when he's vice president without any hesitation to find out whether in fact he did or didn't do that. This should have been resolved a long time ago. If he didn't do it, what's he afraid of? We should have had a complete investigation.
Ray, you mentioned the news media, but you and I both know that the news media is not the news media that we grew up with, okay?
Right.
The news media that we grew up with, we sincerely believe they were objective. They weren't Democrats. They weren't Republicans. They weren't liberals. They weren't conservative. If they were, they kept that to themselves. And they tried not to be biased or prejudiced. They tried to present the news to the American people straight, which was very helpful to this entire country. And that's the way it was supposed to be. But in the last 15 to 20 years, it seems to me like the liberal news media has decided that they have to always side with the Democrats on the national level and be against the Republicans. I think it goes all the way back to college. I think when they were in journalism school, they were taught by professors who were liberal. Some of them were even progressives. And that clouded their opinion, their judgment. And that's why we do not have objective, opinion anymore coming out of our reporters and our columnists.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, way back when we're talking about the 70s and 80s, when you were at in politics in Chicago City Hall, and I was a reporter covering City Hall. I mean, there were some instances where I'm sure bias would get in there, bias on my part, individual bias. But we're taught, and that bias was always challenged. There was always a process by which someone could challenge it.
I think that was more based on personal relationships you might have with a political figure rather than a particular agenda or
right.
philosophical.
Not ideology.
Exactly.
Not ideology.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think though today, it's not individual issues. I think the industry is now doing what individuals may have done 40, 50 years ago. The industry, as you say, I think it's an education process where they've been told you have to stand up not for freedom of speech, but the defense of progressive values that
Absolutely.
protect what you stand for. It's suddenly now a defense of one part of the opinion debate. And I see this every day, where Google News or Yahoo or Apple or all these social media systems, if they don't like your view, if you question the origins of the coronavirus in a way that they disagree, YouTube is a good example, they will censor you. And there's nobody now to put pressure on YouTube and say, wait a minute, why are you saying that I can't have an opinion to question the origins of the coronavirus? But in fact, if you express an opinion that they feel goes outside of their bounds, they can censor you and take it off of YouTube. Millions of views that have been, for some of these, people have been kicked off. We're looking at such a serious problem today that I think it's going to cause worse anguish, for our country, because I think one of our topics is this political divide between the right and the left. We're no closer, are we? It's a huge divide, isn't it, between the right and the left?
No question about it. And it's going to destroy this country unless we do something about it. Absolutely.
And you remember the famous words of one of our someone we both knew, I met, but I'm sure you knew him much better than me, Richard J. Daley. He says, we either hang together or we hang separately. And I think this country is hanging separately. We're separated, we're weak, and the evildoers in the world, like Putin, like North Korea, like Iran, like Belarus, these are people that can murder even their own allies, like this Prigozhin, this horrible mass murderer of the Wagner group, who was upset with something Putin said, and suddenly his plane is blown up out of the sky. Nobody could possibly get away with that except for Putin. And they're rising in power, and they're creating their own NATO, and they're creating their own economic BRIC, I guess it's called, their associations, and they're bringing people together in a way that's going to hurt us. And we're so divided, we can't stand together as one strong nation.
Well, see, I think that the greater enemy that we have is the internal enemy. I believe that there are people in this country, American citizens, who hate America, who want to change America. Now, I think that that's a very dramatic statement to make, but I'm sorry to say, I think that is true. And you see them talk that way periodically. People who are in government, people who are out of government, people that are in the news media talk against the United States of America, forgetting all the great things it's done for its own citizens and the citizens of the world. And I believe It goes all the way back, Ray, to when we dropped teaching history, American history, in elementary school and high school. We went into teaching next Western, I forget what they called it, Western culture or something like that. And it made the United States not the outstanding example of democracy, but just one of a number of democratic countries. And that still didn't hurt the United States that much. They moved on to where they wanted to talk about the world history so they can minimize the influence, the great accomplishments that the American people did. And that now, those people who first started listening to those teachers in elementary school, high school, the professors in college were espousing a creed against the United States of America. You know, I don't know if they're communist or if they're fascist or if they're just haters, but there is definitely a movement here to try to convince American citizens that we are not the greatest nation on earth, that we've done all these things for selfish reasons, which is absolutely, totally untrue. And I think that started, in our universities and now have spread to many of the governmental officials, political people, and also the university professors continue to do the same thing. I was reading just today, the Wall Street Journal listed 155 universities and colleges, ranked them in order. 9 out of the 10 top universities, according to this survey, are East Coast universities. The one that isn't is a West Coast university, Stanford University. So once again, you could see here where we have the East Coast, the West Coast, these well-educated elitists, and it seems like, unfortunately, they're against the rest of the people in this country. The part of this country that people on the East Coast and the West Coast call the flyover country, okay? They never get involved. They don't care what's going on there because they think the people that live there are wrong. And they've alienated so many of those people. And unfortunately, those people now have a guy like Donald Trump as their leader, which exacerbates the situation. It makes it much, much worse for all of us. Somehow we have to find a way to bring this country together. White, Black, Hispanic, and Asian, anybody that's here in this country. Once upon a time, it was truly believed that this was a melting pot. And if we all pulled together, there was nothing that we could not accomplish. And we've seen what we did in the Second World War when we were all together, what we did in various other wars that have taken place since that time, the Marshall Plan, the Berlin Airlift. We have fed so many people in this world, but we don't get any credit for that anymore. We're just criticized for not having reached all the goals of this republic, but we've been continually working for that.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I mean, I think part of the problem is, I guess one way to look at it is our country, this problem that we have is a bunch of individual components, individual movements that are coming together in a way that's dragging us down. And each one is a degradation in a different form. I think we used to be a melting pot. We're not a melting pot anymore. I don't think the new Americans that come here really come here because they love America. I think they come here because they think it's a better place to make money and they could do better for themselves without ever having to pay the price of becoming an American. They don't have to learn the language. They don't even have to work here. They can just come into our welfare system, and we're being obligated, being bullied, shamed into believing that if I don't pay extra tax dollars to help a migrant who isn't doing well in his country, it's my responsibility now to help that person. And that person comes into a political process in which the left says, we don't care whether you love our country. We don't care whether you work. We don't care. whether whether you're a criminal or not. We're not even going to check. All we care about is that you care that we love you and you will vote Democratic, and that they see that, and that it's the right that's saying, wait a minute, don't just let anybody into this country. Let's vet people. Let's filter out the bad, and let's filter out the people who don't really love us. Because if they don't love us, why should they come into our country? And that becomes part of a bigger problem where the media panders to that. The Democrats in the urban cities, they're the ones pandering to these undocumented, illegal immigrants and civilians, people who come into this country illegally. They don't do what my parents did, who came in here legally, learned to speak English, learned the Constitution, learned to love America, and became American citizens and never let go of their heritage. But now you can come in without ever loving America. And if someone challenges you and says anything about you, you're obviously a hater. So it's the left that sees this as a voting base and the right that's being challenged. And I think that's fueling the division. And the media is taking sides. You got all these different components that are falling into place, and creating a massive problem that I think is going to drag us down as a country. And I think it's already dragging us down, but nobody seems to care.
Well, I think it's ironic that when all these illegal immigrants were coming across the border, those cities in Arizona and Texas were complaining about how they were being overwhelmed. Not one of the mayors of big cities said one word about it.
Right.
If they did, it was fine. We have to welcome these people. Well, now that these people have been moved up into these sanctuary cities in the north, you're getting nothing but problems. The mayor of New York is fighting with the governor of New York. He's also fighting with the president of the United States because he's being inundated with all these foreigners because they're coming across the border without any kind of test whatsoever of why they're here, what their goal is. He has to feed them. He has to house them. Same thing here in Chicago. Now, I don't understand how here in Chicago, the progressive administration that's in power in City Hall is taking these immigrants and putting them into areas, black areas, brown areas of the city of Chicago, areas that one day these politicians will tell you there's been such a terrible disinvestment in these communities. That's why they're so bad off. That's why their economic development has been stymied. That's why they don't have enough jobs. Well, here you're taking people who can't speak the language, probably have minimum skills for an economy such as ours, and putting them into the same neighborhood. And now they're petitioning the president of the United States to give these people the right to work here as soon as possible, creating a conflict between the who live in that district in the first place and those that are being put into the district.
They're going to vote Democratic. They want to drag them in here because they believe that they're going to vote Democratic, that the Democrats are arguing, let's take them in, let's build a welfare state, let's make the rich, conservative Republicans, pay the tab for these people. And I'm not against helping immigrants. I remember my parents brought their brothers and sisters into this country, and part of the requirement was, what were they going to do to support themselves? Were they going to come here and go on welfare, or were they going to find a job? And every one of them had to have a job when they came into this country. It was pre-organized. It was set where it didn't become a burden on this country. Today, if you're a leftist and you're a progressive and a Democrat, we don't care. We're just going to take money from one side and we're going to give it to them because we know when we give them the money, we're basically buying their vote and they're going to vote for us. We found a new way to buy votes and circumvent the law. That's what the Democrats have done. And I don't think the Republican Party, the big flaw with the Republican Party and conservatives, they haven't figured out how to address this issue in the face of being called a racist. When you bring up issues about color, people of color, you raise that issue, you are immediately called a racist. And instead of responding in a smart way, you either get bullied into silence or you go spout something off crazy that sounds more racist than what you ever intended to say. So I think the conservatives have done a terrible job of responding, and the left has figured out if someone wants to oppose us, just call them a racist. You want to challenge something, just call them a name, and let's shut them up. Half of them will shut up, and the other half will discredit, and that's how they're winning. But we're losing.
I agree with that. And another point that could be made along those lines is that just this year so far in our universities, there are 25 conservative speakers signed up to speak on college campuses. 5 of those had to be, their invitation was rescinded by the administration because the student body complained so much. The other 20, when they came to speak, they were drowned out. They couldn't speak. There was so much raucous behavior going on by the student body, they couldn't be heard. They are allegedly the champion of freedom of speech.
Right.
Only when it is on their side, not when it's something that would be considered to be opposing them.
Right. Free speech for anybody that agrees with me.
Right, exactly.
Let's expulsion for anybody that doesn't. You know, I remember going to college, and yeah, it was always more liberal than conservative, but you could always hear the other side. You didn't have to agree. It was still someone's choice. Today, you're not given the choice. Today, you're being bullied and told that if you don't believe in what I believe, you're a racist. If you don't believe in what I believe, you're a horrible person. If you don't believe in what I believe, the media is going to rip you apart and you're going to be indicted 4 times. But if you believe in what I believe, we're going to give you an agreement. We're going to give you a legal pre-trial agreement where you agree to plead guilty and we'll slap you on the hand. As long as you're our friend, that's how we're going to treat you. That's what we've done to the justice system. We've corrupted every level of every aspect that made this country great. We've compromised it. We've compromised fairness. We've compromised justice. We've compromised immigration. We've compromised the economy. We've compromised how we spend money in this country. We give money to people who really should be out there working. There should be a new deal to get these people to find jobs and work. But instead of doing that, the new deal is, don't worry about it. Just relax. We're going to send you a paycheck. And we'll get it from Ray Hanania or Bill Lipinski because they're conservative and they're bad people because we don't agree with them. That is an ugly country, and we're on rice paper. And at some point, it's going to fall through.
Ray, we got to end this one because I'm getting so burdened down with all the negativity that's going on.
You're getting depressed?
I'm becoming depressed. Yes, absolutely. Because I'm trying to figure out how we ever swim our way out of this, and it certainly does not look good.
It is terrible. So, but we will talk some more. We've actually, you know, I thought it was a pretty good topic to talk about. I know there are a lot of people that are thinking about all this. They're afraid to speak out because when they do, they get beat on the head. So I'm glad that we're able to raise it and let people hear the truth. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski, a fellow American.
And this is Two Guys on Politics, Season 2, Episode 6. And we will be back next week with a new episode. We hope you'll stay tuned. Thank you, everybody.